Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Maliga Young, Pagdating, saw my chess, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. So I have another one of the World Cup games. I have Jeffery Xiong versus Nils Grandelius. And so for all of my people in the Philippines, I will say mabuhay, kamusta na, maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Appreciate you guys very much as always. For anybody who is coming from Sweden, I will say hello and talk for coming by and taking a look at my video. Appreciate you guys very much. But yeah, if you guys are ready to go, this is round 3 and this is game 2. So we will see what is going on in this round. So we got d4, knight to f6, we see knight to f3. We got g6, we see c4, bishop to g7, and we see knight to c3. And we do see d5, which is the Grünfeld defense. So it's one of those famous openings that people are aware of, like the Grünfeld, you know, like the people that like talking about openings, this is definitely one for you. But if we actually back up, something else that we actually usually see is actually just the regular King's Indian. So then after d6, e4 comes, and you guys, you know, we kind of have a mix between like a modern situation, kind of like a Pierce type situation, and, you know, c4, d4 type situations and stuff like that, just getting that really beautiful center going. But like I said, we did see the Grünfeld defense with d5. And you have a couple of different ways of, you know, dealing with this. You can just take immediately like we saw in the game. You can also play queen to b3. Or just be kind of solid and just play e3, maybe bishop to g5. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do in the position. We see pawn takes d5. We see knight takes d5, and then this allows us to get the really nice pawn center with e4. But this can possibly be short-lived because we see knight takes c3, pawn takes c3, and then what? c5. You guys were like, man, like I saw c5 coming. You are correct. You're geniuses. Okay, so c5 comes. Because, as you can see, white has just such an entirely crazy pawn center that we have to do away with it, man. So c5 has to come. And then we actually see rook to b1. We see castles by black. We see bishop to e2, and then we do see bishop to g4. You are offering this pawn, but you are kind of disrupting white's center. You really kind of want to play bishop to e3 more in the position to make sure that you cover this pawn because the bishop can possibly take here. But we do see rook takes b7 in the game. And then we do see pawn takes d4 and then actually knight takes d4. But if we back up, knight takes d4 is the novelty of the game. So mentioning that. But if we back up, after rook took b7, we have actually seen bishop takes f3 before. And then bishop took f3. We saw pawn takes d4. Pawn takes d4, and then bishop takes d4. We saw this 2 years ago. So like I said, I mean, this is just kind of disrupting white's center. And as you can see, everything is pretty equal. I mean, you do have, you know, these two minor pieces versus the double bishops. But, you know, nothing crazy. But like I said, we do see knight takes d4. You know, we're just preparing to after the bishop takes, to take back here. But nobody's ever going to trade this really beautiful defensive bishop for this knight in the center of the board. We're not doing it. So we do see queen to c8, getting a little tempo in this rook. The rook comes back to b3, and this is a very useful move because we did kind of have an issue with the c3 pawn. So that's just, you know, not only retreating, but putting us on like a more active square. Because if you had something like trades and knight takes, you definitely do want to have, you know, some more protection on this pawn. Because if the rook retreated to anywhere else, you are actually going to be dropping this pawn. It's going to be kind of ugly, so you don't want to do that. So we do see bishop takes e2. We see knight takes e2. And then, like I said before, you see this bishop and queen are both on this pawn, but you do have the rook and the knight both defending it, so you're good to go. You do have an isolated pawn, though, so that could be something coming up. But we do see knight to c6. We see castles by white. Rook comes over to d8. We see queen to c2. We see knight down to e5. We see h3. You know, just making sure we don't have any queen g4 or any knight g4 situations coming like this, because it can be kind of annoying. So we do see queen to c6, just throwing a little attacker on this pawn here, trying to restrict white's queen as much as possible. We do see bishop to g5, tickling this pawn up here, seeing if it's ticklish. So we got rook to d7. We see rook over to d1, trying to get rid of the defender of that e7 pawn. We do see h6, rook takes d7, queen takes d7, and then we just see the bishop backing back up to h4. We see rook over to d8. We see knight to d4, just perfectly plugging up that file because black was pretty much taking full control of it. We do see knight to c6, and this allows white to kind of win a pawn, but then, you know, the pawn gets taken back by black, and you'll see what I mean. The knight takes c6, the queen takes c6, so it seems like it deflects the queen away. Bishop takes e7, but we actually see rook to e8. And now this is kind of inconveniencing the bishop. So the bishop has to retreat, and then we're able to capture this pawn in the center of the board. Rook takes e4. So, you know, everything's still, you know, fairly equal. White does have a passed pawn. So, you know, they are in a little bit better of a position, but it still shows it's fairly equal. So that's not, I mean, this pawn, you know, isn't really going anywhere anytime soon type deal. So we see bishop back to g3. We see rook to e1 with check. We see king to h2. So the king has a perfect little, you know, like air pocket over here to move to. So we do see queen to c4, just blockading that pawn, making sure that it doesn't move. Because if it does move, it's kind of getting dangerous. So we see f3, and this is placing a nice little tempo in his rook on e1. So it's kind of sneaky. So you definitely have to notice that your rook is attacked by this bishop. So the rook does swing to a1. We see queen up to f2, and then we actually see bishop takes c3, you know, trying to grab us a pawn back as black. But unfortunately, this is a blunder. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and see what white plays to take advantage of this move, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So you notice that this bishop is at the moment defended only by the queen. So there is actually a way to double attack the bishop and set up some nice tactical combinations in the position. So queen to e3 is the move. Like I said, it double attacks this bishop. So it forces, you know, a pretty strong action by black. Like you can either retreat it all the way, or you can try to give your own little counterattack. So if we look at a couple of different options, we're going to go ahead and show what actually happened for the rest of the game. So we see bishop up to d4, placing a tempo on the queen. But we do see rook to b8 with check. King comes down to h7. And then we actually see the really, really beautiful possible queen sacrifice of bishop to e5. And this is just a really sweet move because, you know, obviously if you take here, you're going to be looking at checkmate in one. So that'd be like, you know, or just a really beautiful queen sacrifice. So you are really, really stuck in this position, and you are pretty much forced to trade because this rook is actually loose on a1, and you are threatening checkmate. So you have to do something about the checkmate. So we see bishop takes e5, and then we see queen takes e5, and it is actually in this position that Grandelius does resign the game. Now, so if you back up to what we had, you know, you had a couple different options. It seemed like you could just, you know, attack the queen, or you can just kind of retreat the bishop all the way. So let's just look at a couple different variations of what would happen if you made a couple of different moves. So if you actually retreated all the way back to g7, you'd actually be looking at bishop to e5. And this is a really, really annoying move because you're trying to trade off the defender of the king, but you're also attacking this undefended rook here on a1. And you don't have any like checks or anything you can throw in the way other than bishop takes e5. We would actually most likely see queen e6. It's showing this is the strongest move in the position. But you would actually be able to just take the rook on a1. After the queen took on e3, you would see rook taking e3. And then as you guys can see, after bishop takes down here, you are in a very, very, you know, advantageous position as white because you do have the ability to throw the rook up here. And you're going to be collecting a little bit of material at some point, possibly. You know, so backing up after bishop to e, let me see, where's the other one I did? Yeah, after bishop took e5, queen takes e5, and as you guys can see, you know, you're looking at checkmate coming up pretty soon. And the problem is you can't retreat the queen because you're just going to be pinning your queen to the king, so that's not an option. You know, king swinging over to h7, you're just going to be looking at rook to b8, and there's really not a lot that you can really do about this position here because you know, you can't just kind of block like this because you're going to be looking at this, and this is bad. This is kind of like a back rank situation. So you know, you have all of these different situations. So I think that was pretty much it. And you know, when you got down to, you know, actually Bishop, no, you already did that. I already did that, man. Okay, so I got pretty much all the possibilities that you can see. You know, it kind of seems like you can just retreat, or, you know, it seems defendable, but, you know, you have some real dark square weaknesses, and you kind of have some back rank issues. And so you just have too many tactics possible in the position after queen to e3. So queen to e3 was a really nice find by Xiong. And so that ended that game. So I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Congratulations if you found queen to e3. You know, you at least, you know, there's always something we talk about, you know, is like trying to attack undefended pieces in somebody's position. But it's also something to attack under defended pieces, which is what you see here with this bishop here. It's not undefended, but you can place another attacker on it and force some type of concession. So that's actually really nice to see that type of stuff too. So for all of my people in the Philippines, I'll say Maraming Salamat, Aking Makaibigan, Mabuting Pagbadi, and attack for anybody who is coming from Sweden. And I will see you guys next time.